You are listening to Chapter 14 of the Atheist Bible. In this chapter, we will examine religions as social constructions that persist across generations. We will analyze the properties of religions that make them so successful in this endeavor. Our first topic is hoax mails. In what follows, we will use a rather daring comparison. We will argue that religions survive within a society much like hoax mail does. A hoax mail is one that warns of a non-existent threat. One example is the Olympic Torch virus email, which was sent around in 2006. It read as follows: "You should be alert during the next days. Do not open any message with an attached file called invitation, regardless of who sent it." It is a virus that opens an Olympic torch, which burns the whole hard disk C of your computer. This virus will be received from someone who has your email address in his or her contact list. That is why you should send this email to all your contacts. It is better to receive this message 25 times than to receive the virus and open it. This is the worst virus announced by CNN. It has been classified by Microsoft as the most destructive virus ever. This virus was discovered by McAfee yesterday, and there is no repair yet for this kind of virus. This virus simply destroys the zero sector of the hard disk, where the vital information is kept. This email warned of a virus, but the virus did not actually exist. Nevertheless, the fearful and well-meaning users sent the email around by the millions. Why is this? The email had several elements that made it so successful. It warned of a danger, and it claimed support from authoritative sources. It used technical terms to endow expertise to the presumed sender, and it called for the recipient to spread it. This section will argue that religions work in much the same way. They warn of an inexistent danger, that is, hell or its variants, claim support from authoritative sources, and ask people to propagate the message. In the same way that we have just analyzed what makes a hoax mail successful, we will now analyze what makes a religion successful. Let us first introduce the notion of memes. In everyday language, the word meme usually refers to an internet meme, a captioned picture or video that is spread widely through social media. However, the word predates the internet. It was coined in 1960 by British biologist and militant atheist Richard Dawkins. As per its original meaning, a meme is an idea, or in the terminology of this book, a set of statements, that spreads from person to person. A hoax mail, for example, is a meme. The pictures that spread on the internet, the memes in the modern sense, are also memes in Dawkins' sense. But a meme can also be a joke or a popular tune. You hear them and they lead to behavior, telling the joke, humming the tune, that will transport them to other people. More to the point for our analysis, a meme can also be a belief, such as there exists a male and a female God, a moral value, such as 2 women should not marry, or a right, such as every Sunday one should go to church. In this way, a religion can be understood as a collection of memes about the supernatural, including moral values, rights, etc. These memes are then propagated through the generations. Dawkins hypothesized that a meme lives in the human mind like a virus lives in the human body. In this view, a meme is a virus of the mind. And indeed, viruses and memes undergo very similar processes. First, both viruses and memes can be passed on. For example, airborne viruses are transmitted from person to person through coughing and sneezing. Memes, likewise, can also be shared from person to person. A hoax mail, for example, is passed on as recipients forward it to other people. A religious meme can be passed on through education or proselytism. For example, children in Abrahamic households learn from their parents that there is one God, and they are likely to pass this belief down to their own children. Furthermore, both viruses and memes can be modified. For viruses, this happens through mutation. For memes, this happens as the meme merges with others or changes over time, whether on purpose or by happenstance. A hoax email, for example, can be modified by a receiver before forwarding it, or it can exist in multiple versions. Similarly, internet advertisers use hundreds of different versions of a social media post in order to determine which one has the best survival rate. That is, the best chances to become viral. In the same way, religious memes can be modified. For example, Jesus Christ modified the perception of the Jewish God by declaring himself the Son of that God, thus giving rise to a new meme that would eventually develop into a new religion. Finally, both viruses and memes can die out. For viruses, this happens if the host dies before the virus succeeds in spreading. For memes, this happens if the host fails to transmit the meme to another person, or if the other person does not accept the meme. Most hoax emails, for example, die out after a few months once all receivers either refuse to forward it or have already fallen victim to it. For religious memes, we observe that hundreds of religions have died out in this way. From the religion of the Aztecs to the religion of the ancient Romans or the religions of Mesopotamia. Memes are abstract entities, not individual animals or persons. So when we say that a meme survives, we do not mean that some living being survives. Rather, we mean that a particular thought, email, rite, or belief survives across the generations. Much like an animal is only the host of a virus, a person is only the host of a meme. As the Protestant Church of Germany said, religiosity doesn't seem to be in the genes. It should rather be treated as a cultural phenomenon. It can spread, trend, but also decline. Our next topic is meme selection. As we now know, a meme can give rise to several modifications of itself. For example, the Abrahamic religious meme, "Be fruitful and multiply," may inspire modified memes such as, "You shall have as many children as possible," or "You shall have one child," or "You shall have no children," as well as many other variations. Some of these variations will be passed on successfully while others will not. In our example, the meme, "You shall have as many children as possible," will likely result in the production of many children. These children will usually follow the inherited religion and most likely abide by the meme themselves. And in this way, each subsequent generation will have more hosts of the meme than the previous one. This is the strategy of the Abrahamic religions. They encourage adherents to produce many children, thereby securing the religion's survival. The meme, "You shall have no children," in contrast, prohibits the production of children. Thus, there would be no next generation to pass on the meme. In this way, the main method of finding new adherents for the religion would be proselytism. There is indeed a religious denomination that prohibits procreation, the Shakers. If the mainstream Abrahamic religions and the Shaker religion were to be examined side by side, one would postulate that after a few generations there would be more adherents of the Abrahamic religions than of the Shaker religion. This is indeed what happened. As of 2023, the Shaker religion has only 2 adherents. While the death of a meme carrier often entails the death of the meme itself, that is not always the case. A meme can very well encourage a person to sacrifice themselves if only that aids the transmission of the meme to others. In that case, the person will die, but the meme will survive. For example, while the suicide missions of some Islamists in Europe in the 2020s have well eliminated those individual adherents, their actions only further fan the ideas of Islamism. This is much like how viruses are geared to ensure the survival of the virus, not the host. For example, baculoviruses grow inside certain animals and affect their behavior. Once infected by a baculovirus, some species of caterpillar climb to high tree branches where they subsequently dissolve into goo. That goo then drips down onto lower elevation foliage and is ingested by other caterpillars, ensuring the continued survival of the virus. The host dies and the virus survives. And it is the same with the Islamist memes. As Armin Navabi said, "The religions that we have today are a small fraction of all religions that have existed throughout human history. The ones that we are left with have survived because they have more effectively adapted to attract and hold the allegiance of many people." Our next topic is meme design. One way to think about religious memes is to imagine that they have been deliberately designed to survive. For example, it is widely believed that the founder of Scientology deliberately constructed his religion so that it would expand quickly. In particular, Scientology pays members a reward if they manage to attract a new member. thus creating what resembles a giant pyramid scheme. In other cases, memes may have evolved through natural selection, a process in which only the most well-adapted memes survive. For example, in Roman times, the land of Israel was home to many preachers of different religious convictions. Among these, Jesus Christ stood out, and his message became the foundation of a world religion. We can hypothesize that in addition to his personal charisma, several elements made Jesus' message more successful than that of the other preachers. He explicitly taught his adherents to spread the faith. He had an attractive vision of an imminent coming of God. He proposed the concept of an eternal hell, and he taught his adherents that they were all loved by God. While these elements might have made his message appealing, it is unlikely that Jesus designed them deliberately in an effort to make his ideology spread more effectively. If his goal had really been to spread his message as far as possible, he would have avoided the confrontation with the Roman authorities that led to his execution. Now, and hence we can hypothesize that some memes were designed deliberately with the aim of proliferating the religion, while others arose for other reasons and merely happened to proliferate the religion as a side effect. If someone deliberately designs a meme with the spread of the religion in mind, then this meme cannot be God-given. Hence, someone who designs a meme and then claims it to be divine is malicious. Since the memes presented in this chapter may sound as if they were designed deliberately, it may appear as if we are ascribing maliciousness to the prophets. This is, however, not the case. During our analysis, we will not care whether a particular meme was designed to facilitate the spread of the religion or whether it came about naturally. We will just note where a meme exists and analyze its effect on the survival of a religion. As Susan Blackmore said, people are infected with a religion at an early age when they have little mimetic immunity, usually by their own parents. They then spend the rest of their lives paying the price of adherence to false beliefs and in turn infect others. The winners in that long competition to infect human minds are the religions that outdo the competition by developing enjoyable rituals, memorable stories, glorious art and music, explanations for life's mysteries, whether true or not, or nasty meme tricks such as threats of hell and death to the infidel. Our next topic is the story of Hank. To further illustrate how religious memes operate, we turn to a story by James Huger. It is called Kissing Hank's Ass, and we give a summary here. Two adherents of Hank knock at the door of a stranger. The Hankites explain that Hank is a philanthropist who wants to give everyone in town $1 million. However, people have to follow some requirements to get this money. First, everyone must live according to Hank's rules, a mixture of common sense and esoteric dietary guidance. Second, no one is actually allowed to see Hank. Finally, people will get the $1 million only after they have left town. Unfortunately, those who have left town are not allowed to communicate with those in town, so that the people in town must just trust that those who left did indeed get the $1 million. Oh, and people who decline Hank's generous offer will get the shit kicked out of them by Hank, while his loyal followers laugh and enjoy the spectacle. This story sounds patently absurd. Nobody would follow the religion of Hank because Hank promises lots of things but allows nobody to verify them. And yet, the world religions work in much the same way. They also promise many things but allow nobody to verify or criticize them. These are only two of the strategies that religions have developed over time. We will discuss these and other strategies in what follows. Our next topic is meme theories. This chapter will explore religious memes that have been particularly successful. Not all religions have each of these memes, and so our hypothesis is not that every religion has each of these memes, but rather that the presence of a meme within a given religion can help to explain how said religion prevailed over time. More precisely, the theory for each of these memes is, if we compare a religion with the meme and religion without the meme, that is otherwise identical, then the former will more successfully replicate over generations. For each meme, we will note the religions that use it and those that do not. For this discussion, we will examine nearly all religions that currently have more than 10 million adherents: Hinduism, spiritualism, Buddhism, Judaism, Confucianism, Islam, Taoism, Christianity, and the Baha'i Faith. For spiritualism, we will consider only its most visible denomination, Spiritism. For Christianity, we will occasionally distinguish between the denominations of Orthodoxy, Protestantism, and Catholicism. We will also occasionally group the Abrahamic religions together, as well as the Chinese religions and Indian religions. Technically, a religion is a set of statements, some of which are supernatural statements, that is, basically unfalsifiable statements. Ideally, we would state whether this set of statements includes a particular meme. However, there are usually different interpretations of a religion, and these may differ in whether they count the meme among their beliefs. Therefore, we will rarely talk about the religion itself. Rather, we will talk about its holy books, official statements of beliefs, individual documented interpretations, and, where this has been established by scholars, historical mainstream interpretations of the religion. For example, we will not say that some meme is part of Christianity. That would be too sweeping a claim. Rather, we will say that the meme is mentioned in the Bible, that it has been officially adopted by the Catholic Church, or that it belonged, for example, to the common interpretation of Christianity in the Middle Ages, if that has been scholarly established. As always, we will never single out the true interpretation of a religion. As The Economist said, the two most popular religious brands, Christianity and Islam, have replaced smaller local religions in much the same way that Walmart and Lidl have replaced smaller local shops. They have the resources to compete for customers in ways that smaller, less well-financed local gods cannot. Our next topic is fertility. One of the most successful strategies for the proliferation of a religion is to encourage adherents to have many children. If this strategy is combined with the prohibition of interfaith marriage and the religious education of children, it is almost guaranteed to lead to an exponential growth of followers, so long as resources are available. We will elaborate on this meme from several aspects, and so you will hear the word sex a lot in the next half hour, before we move on to other memes. We start by observing that many major religions encourage having children and restrict contraception. Let's start with Judaism. In the Torah, God commands people to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. The Torah also recounts the story of Onan, who spilled his semen on the ground and was therefore punished by God, presumably because he did not use the semen for procreation. The Talmud allows contraception only for pregnant women, nursing women, and women younger than 12 years of age. To this day, the orthodox strains of Judaism discourage contraception. Let us now look at Christianity, and more precisely, Catholicism. This denomination inherits the commandment to bear children and the prohibition of contraception from the Torah. Its catechism reasons that God commanded us to reproduce, and hence holds that every action which proposes to render procreation impossible is intrinsically evil. Islam also encourages fertility. The Quran encourages men to go into your wives as Allah has commanded, because your wives are a tilth for you. So go to your tilth when or how you will. The hadiths tell us that the Prophet Muhammad said, "Marry those who are loving and fertile, for I will be proud of your great numbers before the other nations." Consequently, the current mainstream interpretations of Islam are strongly pro-family and regard children as a gift from God. While the Quran includes nothing on contraception, the hadiths that regulate contraception, in its ancient form, coitus interruptus, discourage it in sexual relations between husband and wife. Spiritism goes in the same direction. According to the Spirit's book, man may regulate reproduction according to his needs, but he ought not to hinder it unnecessarily. The book also holds that the world population will never become too numerous. The Baha'i Faith concurs. The Baha'i Book of Laws states that the very purpose of marriage is the procreation of children, and that contraception, while not necessarily immoral in principle, constitutes a danger to the very foundations of our social life. Not all religions buy into high fertility. Hinduism, for example, takes a different stance. The laws of Manu state that marriage has sexual intercourse for its purpose. The Vedas stipulate that Hindus should marry and that sexual relations are meant for procreation. However, Hinduism also knows the human aim of kama, which refers to the fulfillment of sensual and sexual pleasure. Today, the majority of Hindus see family planning as ethically good, and there is no opposition to contraception. At an average of 2 children per family, the birth rate in India is low by international standards. The Chinese religions, likewise, view family planning favorably. It is true that Confucian philosopher Mencius remarked that it is important to have children. That said, Chinese religions generally emphasize the importance of balance and harmony within the individual, the family, and society. Since having too many children can upset this balance, family planning has been a valued part of human sexuality in both Taoism and Confucianism. Protestantism inherits the commandment to be fruitful and multiply from the Torah. Yet, the Lutheran churches and the Assemblies of God, some of the largest Protestant denominations today, allow contraception, recognizing that sexual union serves not only procreation. As for Buddhism, there is no unifying stance on procreation and contraception in Buddhism. The current Dalai Lama states that married couples should have children, unless there are compelling reasons not to, but also says that family planning is important, and that some countries must curb their population growth. Our next topic is prohibit interfaith marriage. We have seen above that it is beneficial for a religion to encourage large families. This strategy, however, works only if the offspring of such a family stay within the religion. Therefore, marriage across religions is often prohibited. In Judaism, the Talmud prohibits interfaith marriage, saying, "Neither shalt thou make marriages with the Gentiles." This commandment is still followed to this day. A diaspora religion, such as Judaism, would not have survived without this constraint. Even just socializing with people of other faiths is made difficult, supposedly intentionally so by God, by requiring Jews to adhere to kosher dietary rules. Hinduism goes the same way. According to the laws of Manu, marriage may happen only within one caste. Since non-Hindus do not belong to a Hindu caste, interfaith marriage is prohibited by default. In Indonesia, for example, Hindu leaders have declared that marriage conducted between couples of different religions would in fact amount to adultery. Christianity is more ambivalent. Some verses of the Bible prohibit interfaith marriage, saying, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers, and do not intermarry with them." However, another verse seems to permit it, saying that the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife has been sanctified through her believing husband. Consequently, different denominations of Christianity have different views. Catholicism, for example, forbid interfaith marriage until 1917. Nowadays, it allows mixed marriages with a dispensation. No ceremony of another religion is allowed, and the children have to be raised as Catholics. Thus, the basic purpose of replicating the religion remains intact. Orthodox Christianity, likewise, forbids marriage with non-Christians, as the author of this book can testify from personal experience. Islam has a different strategy. The Quran generally prohibits marriage with non-Muslims, saying, "Do not marry polytheistic women until they believe," and "believing women are not lawful wives for the disbelievers." However, it does allow Muslim men to marry women from the pre-Islamic Abrahamic religions. Under the assumption that the husband dominates the marriage, this law allows Islam to spread also in mixed marriages. This is the current mainstream interpretation of Islam. It is also the law in most Muslim countries, including in more secular countries, such as Tunisia. As for Confucianism, Confucius does not discuss interfaith marriage in his writings. However, in the 2014 hearing of the Supreme Court of Indonesia on the matter of interfaith marriage, the Supreme Council for Confucian Religion in Indonesia stated that a marriage should be conducted to achieve happiness and continue the bloodline. No political view, ethnicity, understanding, culture, or even religion can stop it. However, an interfaith wedding cannot be conducted with a Confucian ceremony. Not all religions prohibit interfaith marriage. Spiritism, for example, does not. The Spirit's book mentions no such law. The Baha'i faith, too, permits interfaith marriage. According to the Baha'i faith, all religions are inspired by God, and therefore, interfaith marriage is allowed. This differentiates the Baha'i faith from other mainstream religions, which also sometimes claim that all people believe in the same God, but then do not allow interfaith marriage. As for Buddhism, there is not much information in traditional Buddhist texts on marriage. Contemporary Buddhism seems to consider marriage a secular affair. In Indonesia, where marriage is allowed only according to the rules of the religion of the spouses, and religious rulers are thus asked to state their position on the matter, Buddhist authorities have refused to give their view on the legality of interfaith marriage. Our next topic is shunning homosexuality. Only around 2% to 10% of the human population is thought to be homosexual. Thus, even if no homosexual were ever to reproduce, which is already a false assumption, homosexuality is unlikely to reduce the Darwinian competitiveness of a society. This is actually why homosexuality has survived Darwinian selection until today in the first place. However, in the past, and still today, homosexuality was likely perceived as a practice that could spread, much like the habit of drinking alcohol. Religious leaders who thought this way, thus, had an incentive to forbid homosexuality in order to ensure the continued reproductive success of their adherents, and thereby their religion. Though this prohibition does not change a person from gay to straight, social pressure may push someone to marry a partner of the opposite sex and to found a family. For the continuation of the faith, it does not matter whether the person enjoys heterosexual relations as long as they produce children. In Judaism, the prohibition of homosexuality is anchored in the Torah, which states that a man shall not lie with another man as he would with a woman. It is an abomination. Historically, the punishment for homosexuality was death. Today, Judaism no longer implements the death penalty, though homosexuality is still shunned in Orthodox Judaism. Catholicism inherited the punishment of homosexuality from the Torah. However, it also no longer implements the death penalty, though it still considers homosexual acts grave sins and homosexual tendencies objectively disordered. It commands that people with homosexual tendencies be accepted with respect and sensitivity. Other interpretations of Christianity have different stances. While the mainstream interpretations of Christianity do not allow homosexuals to marry, liberal Christians are supportive of homosexuality, with some churches allowing same-sex marriage, as we will see later. Islam, in contrast, is rather clear on homosexuality. The Quran appears to condemn homosexuality, decrying men lusting after fellow men. Indeed, the vast majority of Muslims today reject homosexuality, and it is punishable by death in 12 Muslim countries. The Baha'i faith views homosexuality as a distortion of nature, which should be controlled and overcome. Buddhism also condemns homosexuality. In the words of the current Dalai Lama, homosexuality is sexual misconduct. In Indonesia, Buddhist leaders have spoken up against homosexuality as well. Spiritism has no clear stance. Given the encouragement to reproduce, Allan Kardec most likely looked unfavorably upon homosexuality. At the same time, the Spirit's book makes no mention of it. Hinduism is also ambivalent. The laws of Manu appear to condemn homosexuality as an unnatural offense with a male, but prescribe only a bath in response. Indeed, hardly any condemnation or bias against homosexuality exists in other Hindu sacred literature. Hinduism assumes that people are born with different penchants due to their previous lives, and thus, same-sex desires are seen as a previous life conditioning, rather than a matter of choice. Confucianism is more conservative. Confucianism places great value on the marriage between husband and wife, on giving birth and raising children, and on child piety. In this spirit, the prevalent interpretations of the religion condemn homosexuality. Not all religions buy into this scheme. Taoism, for example, is more flexible. Traditional Chinese society did not strongly object to and even tacitly allowed male homosexuality. Today, Taoism knows a rabbit deity who protects homosexuals, and a temple in Taiwan dedicated to this deity draws thousands of adherents per year. Some newer religions are also more liberal. The Wiccan charge of the goddess states, in the words of the goddess, that all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals. Realism, likewise, does not condemn homosexuality. As some wise person said, man created God in his image, intolerant, sexist, homophobic, and violent. Our next topic is sex only for procreation. As we have seen, one of the most effective strategies for the proliferation of a religion is to encourage large families. Now, how can one best entice people to do this? One way is to prohibit sex and sexual pleasure outside of procreation, including homosexuality as discussed before, the use of contraception as discussed before, premarital sex, which can lead to births outside the accepted family institution, prostitution, which allows sexual satisfaction without procreation and wastes sexual energy. It appears that many older societies did not understand that semen regenerates and thus thought one should not waste it on a prostitute, but rather use it only for the continued generation of the family. Masturbation, which allows sexual satisfaction without procreation and also wastes sexual energy. Pornography, which is seen as an aid to masturbation. And abortion, which terminates the life of a likely adherent. Consequently, most world religions have developed a rather strict sexual morale. The Catholic Church follows the strategy to a T. It teaches explicitly that sexual pleasure is morally disordered when sought for itself, isolated from its procreative and unitive purposes. Quite possibly, we may hypothesize, because those who wrote the passage never had any of it. Consequently, masturbation is an intrinsically and gravely disordered action. The carnal union between an unmarried man and an unmarried woman is gravely contrary to the dignity of persons. Civil authorities should prevent the production and distribution of pornographic materials. Prostitution is a social scourge, and human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception. Jesus reportedly said, "Whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery," which is understood as a prohibition of pornography in Catholicism and conservative variants of Christianity. Islam goes in the same direction. Current mainstream interpretations of Islam generally encourage sex between husband and wife. At the same time, the Quran prohibits sex during menstruation, the time in a woman's cycle during which she cannot conceive. It also requests men and women guard their private parts, which traditionalist interpretations today read as a prohibition of pornography and masturbation. The Quran also prohibits sex outside the couple. Judaism also has strict sexual morals. According to the Torah, a woman who is found to not be a virgin upon her marriage is to be stoned to death. If the charge is true and no proof of the young woman's virginity can be found, she shall be brought to the door of her father's house, and there the men of her town shall stone her to death. She has done an outrageous thing in Israel by being promiscuous while still in her father's house. You must purge the evil from among you. Sex outside of wedlock also incurs the death penalty. Like in Islam, sex during menstruation is forbidden. Ejaculation in general is considered unclean. Judaism calls this the sin of spilling semen in vain. Based on these sources, conservative variants of Judaism shun masturbation and premarital sex to this day. Orthodox Judaism even prohibits a man and a woman who are not married to each other from being in the same room alone, under laws called yichud. Buddhism, too, is conservative. The second of the 5 virtues of Buddhism prohibits sexual misconduct, which is commonly interpreted as sex outside of marriage. Buddhism identifies sexual craving as one of the hindrances to attaining insight, and the Buddha says explicitly that one should avoid sensual desires. For Baha'is, too, no sexual act can be considered lawful unless performed between lawfully married persons. Hence, the faith condemns sex outside wedlock, as well as premarital sex, masturbation, and abortion. Within Spiritism, abortion is condemned along with whatever hinders the operations of nature. In particular, the faith holds that sensuality should not be given preference over reproduction. Confucianism, for its part, goes in the same direction, although it is a bit inconsistent on the question. Historically, Confucianism taught people to repress human desire, including sexual impulse. It held that the primary purpose of sex was procreation. Female virginity was highly valued, premarital sex was strictly forbidden for women, and a woman could be executed for adultery. Men, on the other hand, were allowed to have concubines and to engage in sex with prostitutes. Taoism, too, has no space for sexual pleasures outside marriage. In Taoist belief, if a sexual conduct happens, but it is not between a man and a woman who are married to each other, it is a sexual misconduct. According to the commentary in the ultra-supreme Elder Lord's Scripture of Precepts, masturbations, premarital sexual conducts, adulteries, prostitutions, having sex with prostitutes, homosexual sex, etc., are all sexual misconducts. Hinduism is more flexible. Some ancient Hindu texts condemn extramarital sex and masturbation, stating, "Let not a man gratify his desires with unnatural objects or think incontinently of another's wife. For such a man will be born in a future life as a creeping insect. He who commits adultery is punished both here and hereafter, and when dead he falls into hell." The laws of Manu stipulate that addressing a woman outside the village or offering her gifts also counts as adultery, for which the penalty is death. At the same time, the Kama Sutra, a text from the 3rd century BCE, describes masturbation and homosexual and bisexual acts, indicating that sexual attitudes were not as conservative as the holy texts suggest. Some new religions are, likewise, more liberal. The Wiccan charge of the goddess states, in the words of the goddess, that all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals. Realism, likewise, is accepting of all sexual acts as long as they are consensual and between adults. As some wise person said, if homosexuals had a book that called for religious people to be stoned, how long would it take to be classified as hate speech? Our next topic is child marriage. One way to increase the number of children within the family unit is to maximize sexual activity during the fertile period of women's life by encouraging or forcing a woman to marry at a young age, just after she has reached puberty. This strategy not just increases the number of children per woman, it also shrinks the gap between the generations and speeds up the reproduction process over time. Hence, many religions support child marriage for women. Catholicism is a case to the point. According to canon law, the minimum marriageable age for a woman is 14. In Western countries, a minimum age of 18 is generally legally enforced. However, in sub-Saharan Africa, which is predominantly Catholic and Muslim, child marriage rates comprise between 30% and 46% of all marriages. Islam, likewise, has no rule against child marriage. According to Muslim tradition, the Prophet Muhammad married his wife Aisha when she was just 6 years old and had intercourse with her when she was 9. The Quran holds that Muhammad is the perfect role model to follow. The Quran also discusses how to divorce girls who have yet to menstruate, which means that the book allows the marrying prepubescent girls in the first place. Today, some interpretations of the faith prohibit child marriage. Still, as a group, Muslim countries have the highest rates of child marriage when compared with developed countries and with non-Muslim developing countries, according to the Organization of Islamic Countries. Hinduism, too, has nothing to say against child marriage. On the contrary, the laws of Manu allow for a girl as young as 8 years of age to marry. A man aged 30 years shall marry a maiden of 12 who pleases him, or a man of 24, a girl, 8 years of age. Indeed, 23% of women in India are married before the age of 18. Historical Judaism also permitted child marriage. The Talmud states that he who marries his children just before they attain puberty, of him Scripture saith, and thou shalt know that thou do not sin. It also describes how a girl who is younger than 11 may go ahead and engage in relations in her usual manner with her husband, since it is assumed that a minor who is less than 11 years old cannot become pregnant. However, child marriage is rare today in most Jewish communities, and the minimum age for marriage in Israel, the only Jewish country, is 18. The Baha'i faith prescribes 15 as a minimum age for marriage. However, it also stresses obedience to one's government, and thus the minimum marriageable age for adherents is set by their secular governments. Not all religions permit child marriage. For example, child marriage is not prevalent in Buddhist, Protestant, Taoist, Confucian, and Orthodox countries. For Confucianism in particular, the Book of Rites seems to suggest an age of 30 for marriage. When he is 20, we call him a youth. When he is 30, we say he is at his maturity. He has a wife. Still, many religions do support child marriage. There might be an additional reason for this. In general, a woman who marries at a young age is less likely to be educated. She's also less likely to educate her children. This, in turn, plays into the hands of the religion as well, as less educated people are less likely to challenge their religion. As Deborah Feldman said, "There's a Jewish law for everything. The Torah offers a punishment for every crime, no matter how insignificant. But what about child abuse? The Torah doesn't talk about what to do with a man who wants to have sex with children. It talks about men who have sex with other men and men who have sex with animals. Those are unforgivable sins. But there is nothing said about the sexual abuse of children. Here's a side remark about that. American millionaire Jeffrey Epstein serves as an example to Deborah Feldman's point. He stated that his interpretation of Judaism prevented him from committing suicide, but had apparently no such faith issues when soliciting prostitution from a minor. In what concerns child marriage, German author Thilo Sarrazin offers a hypothesis. He notes that the continuation of child marriage in our days goes hand in hand with an obsession about virginity. That is, the younger the bride, the more likely she is to be a virgin. Virginity, in turn, increases a man's ability to impress a woman with his sexual experience, an asset in parts of the world where the traditional role of men is in question. Our next topic is oppression of women. We have seen that a religion can proliferate best when its adherents produce many children. This is best accomplished if a woman marries at a young age. Not all major religions buy into this scheme. Buddhism, the Chinese religions, and the newer Abrahamic religions do not. However, even these religions show a Darwinian interest in maintaining their population of adherents by prohibiting interfaith marriage, shunning homosexuality, and/or limiting sex to procreative purposes. An independent woman is a hindrance to these efforts. She might be more interested in pursuing work, dedicating herself to some pastime, or even obtaining roles in society, rather than in producing and rearing children. For this reason, many major religions restrict the roles of women to household and child-caring duties. Furthermore, for most of history, a man had no reliable way to tell whether he was the biological father of a child, and in a world where nearly everyone was poor, most were reluctant to risk wasting bread on another man's offspring. Many, therefore, asserted oppressive control over female fertility, forbidding their wives and daughters to mingle with other men. In this spirit, men have long shaped the law to their advantage, and this reflects also in religious law. Judaism has traditionally given fewer rights to women. The Torah considers wives to be the property of the husband, establishes the man as the ruler over his wife, and punishes the loss of female but not male virginity. As Canadian-American cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker commented, the possibility that a woman had a legitimate interest in not being raped or acquired as sexual property did not seem to register in anyone's mind. In this spirit, there is a Jewish prayer that goes, "Blessed are you, Lord, our God, ruler of the universe, who has not created me a woman." And indeed, the classical rabbinic social policy preferred to situate women's activities in the private sphere of the home, while men occupied the public domains of worship, study, community leadership, and judicial authority. To this date, women occupy a secondary status in Israel's Jewish society, backed by paternalistic legislation and the expectation that women will assume most household responsibilities. While most Israeli women do fulfill a military service obligation, women in the military are limited to support positions. Israeli law gives the Orthodox religious establishment a monopolistic control over marriage and divorce for all Jewish citizens, thus legalizing women's substantial disadvantages in religious family law. As an example, over 10,000 women are agunot, women who cannot get a divorce because their husbands refuse to grant one. That said, attitudes have started to change. Reform Judaism holds that women are entitled to the same religious rights as men, and it ordains female rabbis. In the United States in particular, Jewish women take more assertive roles within their religion and have gradually watered down traditional gender roles. Christianity inherited the dominance of men over women from Judaism and the Torah. The New Testament perpetuates this dominance by stipulating that a wife must be submissive to her husband. In addition, Christianity is traditionally dominated by male entities. The vast majority of its prophets are male, its God is male, Father in heaven, and its main addressee of worship is male, Jesus. Hence, most major Christian denominations give leadership roles exclusively to males, priests, popes, bishops, etc. This general preference for males in positions of power is just the tip of the iceberg. It goes hand in hand with the less measurable but more ubiquitous discrimination against women, in which men are generally considered the leaders in the family and society. Orthodoxy holds that the father is the head of the family, and that the wife must be devoted to her husband. Baptism even holds that men are the head of women in general. Pentecostalism and Lutheranism are an exception. They support full equality of the sexes. Islam, too, limits the role of women in society. The Quran holds that a woman may not marry a Christian or Jew, while a man can, that a woman must be obedient to her husband, that a man can marry up to 4 women, while a woman can marry only 1 man, that a son inherits twice the share of a daughter, that in court, the word of a man is twice that of a woman, that a woman is a tilth for her husband, which he can approach as he wills, and that a man can discipline his wife, possibly because of her deficiency of the mind. The reliance of the traveler goes further, ruling that women must cover every part of their body except their hands and face, though they should cover their face if possible, that they should not speak to men without necessity, that murdering a woman incurs only half of the indemnity of murdering a man, that husbands have full rights over their wives, that women may not travel and must remain in the home if her husband wants her to, and that a husband can divorce his wife, but a wife can divorce her husband only with his agreement. In the view of the Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt, this Sharia conforms to the practice and faith of the Orthodox Sunni community. That is not entirely true. Statistics show that Muslim opinion varies considerably when it comes to women's rights. Still, by and large, the Muslim society is conservative. 75% of Muslims in the Middle East believe that a woman should not receive equal inheritance. Nearly half believe that women should wear a head covering. In France, 60% of Muslims believe that women should veil. In Egypt, Lebanon, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, and Palestine, half of men believe a married woman should not have the same right to work as a man, and 60%, 90% of men expect to control their wives' personal freedoms, from what they wear and where they go to when the couple has sex. The basic inequality that a woman may not marry outside the faith while a man can is almost universally upheld among Muslims worldwide. Furthermore, in nearly all Muslim countries surveyed in a Pew Research study, the majority of Muslims stated that a wife should always obey her husband. In much of the Arab world, male dominance is enshrined also in the law. According to the Baha'i faith, the emancipation of women and the achievement of full equality is one of the most important prerequisites for peace. Unfortunately, this religion does not follow its own advice. Women are excluded from its house of justice at the behest of the faith's founder. The reason for their exclusion is unknown. The lights of guidance say that the wisdom of this will be known in the future. We can only accept believing it is right, but not able to give an explanation calculated to silence an ardent feminist. The religion also states that the hearts of women are more tender and susceptible than the hearts of men, that woman by nature is opposed to war, and that the woman has greater moral courage than man. These statements are examples of benevolent sexism, attitudes and beliefs that appear positive or well-intentioned towards women, but ultimately reinforce traditional gender roles and maintain male dominance. If the Baha'i faith really saw men and women as equal, it would make no such generalizations. Hinduism also limits the roles of women. The laws of Manu require that, in childhood, a female must be subject to her father, in youth to her husband, when her lord is dead to her sons. A woman must never be independent. On the contrary, she shall obey her husband, and a husband must be constantly worshipped as a god by a faithful wife. Though the authenticity of these texts is disputed, this does not change the fact that Hindu society works de facto as described in these laws. Upheld by religion and traditional practices, the patriarchal society propagates the idea that women should be subservient to men, that they are the weaker sex, emotionally, intellectually, and physically, and that girls are worth less than boys, because they usually do not earn money, will have to be endowed with a dowry, and will anyway be married off to another family. Due to these socio-religious beliefs of female inferiority, some female babies are killed, leading to a notable sex imbalance in India. The girls who survive are often restricted to household duties, are measurably less literate than their male peers, and are traditionally considered the property of others, first the father, then the husband. Most Hindu women still follow restrictions of movement during menstruation based on religious beliefs. And in rural areas, girls are forced to stay home from school during their menstrual cycle, lest they pass by a temple in the street in an unclean state. Buddhism also shows depreciation of women. According to the Buddha, it is impossible that a woman should be the perfect, rightfully enlightened one. According to him, women are prone to anger. Women are envious. Women are miserly. Women are unwise. This is why women do not sit in council, engage in business, or go to Cambodia. The Buddha has also compared women to black snakes in that they are wrathful, hostile, of deadly venom, double-tongued, and betray friends. He also stated that, for the most part, women are adulterous, and that women die unsatisfied and discontent in two things. What two? Sexual intercourse and giving birth. Perhaps accordingly, the Buddha classified women into 7 types of wives, each of which is either evil or submissive. Modern apologists consider the sources from which these sayings derive to be inauthentic. They point to the fact that women have always played a significant role in Buddhism as lay disciples, that the Buddha admitted women into the monastic order, and that he affirmed their equality in intellectual and spiritual capabilities. Nevertheless, even these apologists admit that the Pali Canon occasionally transmits patriarchal and misogynistic views. These views have been incorporated into Theravada, the dominant Buddhist denomination in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. For this denomination, a female birth is considered the result of less favorable karma than a male birth. Only a male can aspire to become a Buddha, and more generally, women are subordinate to men. As a result, Theravada Buddhist countries are shaped largely by patriarchal attitudes, promoting a universal ideology of masculine superiority. Mahayana, the more liberal denomination of Buddhism, which is prevalent in China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Singapore, and Vietnam, takes a different path. The scripture of the Pure Land Sutras requires a change of sex at rebirth for women to attain Buddhahood. However, later interpretations propose that this change of sex can take place in a woman's mind, thus allowing her to start the path towards Buddhahood during her lifetime. While this possibility is seen as proof of egalitarianism in modern commentaries, the theme of sexual transformation still stereotypes the female as biologically and psychologically limited. Confucianism depreciates women. Confucius reportedly said that girls and inferior men are hard to get along with. The Lessons for Women, an influential Confucian text from around 100 CE, written by a woman, says that women should be silent, hardworking, and compliant. Similarly, the 3 obediences of Confucianism hold that women should be obedient to their fathers before getting married, to their husbands while married, and to their sons after their husband's passing. These principles are reflected in the deeply patriarchal Confucian family system, in which a woman is seen as a complement to her husband's family. Without that kinship tie, it would be nearly impossible for a woman to acquire social recognition. In prioritizing the perpetuation of patrilineage, women often participate in gender-oppressive practices such as female infanticide, child marriage, and concubinage. Her failure to produce children is one of the 7 grounds for her expulsion from the marriage, according to the Confucian system. In that same vein, widows may not remarry. Newer readings of the texts have put aside the traditional gender roles of Confucianism and focus instead on the concept of gender-neutral friendship as the guiding principle for interhuman relations. Not all religions depreciate women. Spiritism, for example, is decidedly egalitarian. Since Spiritism was born after the Enlightenment, it explicitly supports equal rights for women. Taoism is much older than Spiritism, but also remarkably egalitarian. This religion strives for a balance between male and female, and overall takes a more egalitarian stance. The ultra-supreme Elder Lord's Scripture of Precepts, for one, mentions women exclusively in the conjunction men and women. This is because, different from the moral frameworks of most other major religions, there is no regulation that applies exclusively to women. The discrimination of women is part of a larger pattern in some religions. The earlier women marry, the less educated they are, the more children they will have, the less educated these children will be, and the more religious and populous the religious society will be as a whole. As John Stuart Mill said, "I consider gender to be as entirely irrelevant to political rights as difference in height or in the color of the hair." Our next topic is heaven. A religion that promises life after death will be more successful than a religion that doesn't. Hence, most religions today promise some form of life after death. Let's start with Judaism. The Torah is not entirely clear about what happens after death. Kohelet, a son of King David, wonders poetically, "The same fate awaits both animals and humans. As one dies, so dies the other. All go to the same place, all come from dust, and to dust all return. Who knows if the human spirit rises upward, and if the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth?" Other passages are similarly vague. Nevertheless, the Talmud establishes resurrection after death as a fundamental principle of the faith, and makes clear that those who doubt it shall not share it. Christianity concurs. Jesus promises life after death. At the resurrection, people will be like the angels in heaven, as does the book of Revelation. The Nicene Creed also affirms the resurrection of the dead, stating, "I look for the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come." Consequently, Catholicism, too, incorporates the belief in the afterlife. The Baha'i faith, too, postulates a spiritual world beyond the grave, though not a physical resurrection. Islam, in contrast, appears to suggest a physical resurrection. The concept of heaven is very prominent within Islam. From a sample of 100 verses taken at random from the Quran, 10% were concerned with promises of heaven. The book promises gardens of perpetual bliss with a running spring and rivers of milk, where men receive large-breasted virgins called huris. A hadith specifies that there will be 72 for every Muslim man. Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and Sikhs generally believe in reincarnation of the soul. In this model, following death, the soul is reborn onto this earth either in a better position, say as a king, or in a worse position, say as an ant, depending on the good and bad deeds committed in one's life. If a person advances spiritually to a sufficient degree, they can arrive in the desired final state of nirvana. In Hinduism, the Rig Veda states that as soon as he departs, he takes birth again, and hints at relief from the cycle of rebirth. When he sees the other, the Lord of all, whom all devotees worship, and realizes that all greatness is his, then he is relieved of his misery. The laws of Manu, likewise, stipulate that a vicious man sinks to the nethermost, hell, while he who dies, free from vice, ascends to heaven. For a Buddhist, according to the Dalai Lama, it is necessary to accept past and future rebirth, and once we achieve liberation from the cycle of existence, By overcoming our karma and destructive emotions, we will not be reborn. In Spiritism, as in the Indian religions, the spirit aims to achieve perfection during several cycles of rebirth, and once successful, enters a state of perfect happiness as a purified spirit. The final state is eternal happiness, consisting in knowing all things, in feeling neither hatred, jealousy, envy, ambition, nor any of the passions that make men unhappy. Different from the other Abrahamic religions, Spiritism has taken care that the happy spirits do not suffer from the sight of the sinners being punished in hell, because they know that it will have an end. They aid those who suffer to become better and lend them a helping hand. To do this is their occupation, and is a joy for them when they succeed. Taoism likewise knows a state of spiritual immortality, wherein the death of the body has no impact on the soul, which continues to live. The prevalent belief in the Chinese religions is that every human being has a spirit, which lives on after death and becomes the object of ancestor worship, the Shen. As Marshall Brain said, many adults never outgrow their childhood fear of death. Because the thought of death is so distressing to some people, it is not surprising that they try to invent a way out. The fairy tale that Christians have invented is called heaven, and they have also formulated the concept of eternal life. The Christian fabrications are, of course, entirely different from the heaven and God of all other religions, because all of them are imaginary. Egyptians believed something silly involving pyramids and sun gods and so on. Greeks believed in the river Styx and Hades and so on. Muslims believe in their 72 virgins and so on. It is all gibberish, but people believe in their fantasies quite passionately. Our next topic is heaven for martyrs. The promise of heaven can make people adhere to a religion. It can also supply the religion with warriors who are ready to sacrifice their lives. If a man believes that heaven awaits him upon death, he will be much more willing to go to war for his faith. In his thinking, he has nothing to lose. Either he wins the battle or he dies, becomes what is called a martyr, and goes to heaven. A religion that has this type of warrior is more likely to prevail in battle against a religion that does not. Early Christianity claimed that anyone who died for the faith was instantly transferred to the presence of God as a martyr. Martyrdom also absolved all sins. Indeed, Christianity has historically benefited from those ready to sacrifice their lives for the faith, most notably during the Crusades, military expeditions between 1095 and 1291 that aimed to conquer Jerusalem and its surroundings from Muslim rule. Christian warriors believed that they would go to heaven if they died in battle, and therefore they had little hesitation in joining the war. While the Crusades had several religious, economical, and political motivations, they ultimately served to establish the hegemony of the Catholic Church. Today, in contrast, apparently less sure of the post-mortal advantages of martyrdom in armed conflict, the Church insists that all citizens and all governments are obliged to work for the avoidance of war. Islam also knows martyrdom. The Quran promises heaven to those who die fighting for Allah. Never think of those martyred in the cause of Allah as dead. In fact, they are alive with their Lord, well provided for. We can hypothesize that in the 8th century CE, this belief helped the military expansion of Islam during the Islamic Golden Age. Still in the 21st century, the Islamic State, an Islamist group that aspired to create a caliphate, was able to uphold its grip on the Middle East also because it had fighters who were not afraid to die. As Oscar Wilde said, "A thing is not necessarily true because a man dies for it." Our next topic is hell. A person who has died cannot report what happened to them. Therefore, religions can say arbitrary things about life after death. Some religions use this to tell people that if they do not follow the rules of the religion, they will be tortured after death in a place called hell. If a religion promises hell in cases of disobedience, then its adherents are more likely to obey. Therefore, most religions that we encounter today have some form of hell, and they have come up with the most impressive forms of punishment, as we shall see. The idea of hell also satisfies the human desire for justice. Let's start with Buddhism. Buddhism knows several hells, both hot and cold. The most fearful hell, according to the Buddha, is Avicii, the unmitigated hell. In Avicii, the evildoers tortured with red-hot iron stakes and copper cauldrons, axes, excrement, hot ashes, fire, and swords until all bad karma is used up. Then the being is reborn. The same goes for Hinduism. The Bhagavad Gita says that demoniacal men will fall downwards into a foul hell. The laws of Manu describe 21 hells, in which sinners are devoured by ravens, boiled in jars, and subjected to diseases. Those who committed mortal sins spend many years passing through these dreadful hells and then, after the expiration of their term of punishment, are reborn. Different sins carry different types of rebirths. Killing a Brahmin lands you in the womb of a pig. Thieves become cannibalistic creatures. For stealing grain, a man becomes a rat. And for stealing pearls, one becomes a goldsmith. Jainism, too, knows several hells, called narakas, where, similar to Buddhism, bad karma is destroyed. Common interpretations hold that there are 7 hells, each named after its predominant substance. For example, gravel, mud, smoke. The hells are situated in the lower levels of the universe, below the human realm, which is itself below the heavenly realm. Judaism also knows hell. The early Jews were familiar with the valley of Gehenna outside of Jerusalem, where Canaanites and later Israelites sacrificed their children by fire to the gods. The sacrifices of Gehenna, together with the later claim in the Torah that multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt, developed into the Jewish belief that all sinners will burn in fire. Sinners go to hell immediately after their death. If they have not led others into sin, they are released after 12 months. The New Testament inherited the concept of Gehenna from Judaism and developed it further. While the Jewish Gehenna lasted for only 1 year, Jesus extended hell to eternity. It is a place of unquenchable fire, into which the body is thrown after sinning. Hell has weeping and gnashing of teeth, everlasting destruction, raging fire, and eternal fire, and burning sulfur. Hell is where the devil, the beast, and false prophet will be tormented day and night forever and ever, along with those who worship the beast or receive its mark. This physical view of hell was later abandoned in favor of a more abstract concept of suffering in many, though not all, Christian denominations. As the last of the Abrahamic religions to develop before the Enlightenment, Islam has perfected the threat of hell derived from Judaism and Christianity. The Quran mentions hell with detailed brutality in roughly every 7th verse. Hell contains flames that crackle and roar, fierce boiling waters, scorching wind and black smoke, and it roars and boils as if it would burst with rage. Its wretched inhabitants sigh and wail, their scorched skins constantly exchanged for new ones, so that they can taste their torment anew. They drink festering water, and though death appears on all sides, cannot die. They are linked together in chains of 70 cubits and wear pitch for clothing, have their faces covered with fire, have boiling water poured over their heads that melts their insides as well as their skin, and are dragged back by hooks of iron should they try to escape. Their remorseful admissions of wrongdoing and pleas for forgiveness are in vain. In Spiritism, it is believed that the spirits are punished after death or in the next life with indescribable torture. It is utterly impossible to describe the mental tortures that are the punishment of some crimes. Even those by whom they are experienced would find it difficult to give you an idea of them. However, different from the older, pre-Enlightenment religions, Spiritism prescribes a more abstract punishment. The sufferings are as various as are the causes by which they are produced, and include envy, regret, jealousy, rage, despair, remorse, and indescribable moral anguish, and being tortured by the inability to satisfy one's cravings. In addition, Spiritism recognizes punishment on earth in the form of reincarnation. Purgatory is physical and moral suffering, The period of expiation, it is almost always upon the earth that you are made by God to undergo your purgatory and to expiate your wrongdoing. The Chinese religions inherited the concept of hell from Buddhism. In the Diyu, as hell is known, the dead are punished by physical tortures appropriate to their crimes. In Taoism, a person who does not follow the Tao will fall into the restless and unlimited sufferings, and when they are released from such sufferings, they will be reborn as animals or other inferior beings. They will be born in uncivilized places. Their lives will be short, or they will be physically disabled. They will be poor, homeless, and suffer from coldness. They will not be able to live peacefully. If they get any money or properties, those things will be stolen or robbed by others. Worst of all, their spouses will be ugly, adulterous, and greedy. As Fabrizio De André said, hell exists only for those who fear it. Here's a side remark about that. Just how well the threat of hell works still today is exemplified by the case of a Texan women who held 2 Mexican women as slaves for 14 years in the early 2000s, threatening them with hell if they did not obey. Our next topic is emotional bondage. When someone helps us, we may feel indebted to this person and perhaps obliged to do them a favor in return. This mechanism is also used by some religions who claim that their God did something for the people and so demand thankfulness to said God and obedience to their laws in return. In this way, the religions bind the adherents emotionally to their God and their rules. Judaism uses this idea as follows. The Torah tells us that God led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt to the land of Israel. God then demands constant remembrance of this act. Praise the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. Do not forget the Lord your God. You were slaves in Egypt, but he made you free and brought you out of that land. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. In return, God demands that people follow his laws. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt and follow carefully my decrees. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt and that the Lord your God brought you out of there. Therefore, observe the Sabbath day. And the Lord brought us out of Egypt and commanded us to obey all his decrees. In this way, adherents are constantly reminded that they owe their freedom to God. They are indebted to God and must be thankful to him and follow his laws. We will later see that the slavery in Egypt and the exodus to Israel, for which Jews must be thankful to God, most likely never happened. Thus, the Torah creates the emotional bondage of adherence to God out of thin air. Christianity, for its part, knows the concept of original sin, which, by and large, is the notion that Adam and Eve, the mythical ancestors of humanity, contradicted God's will and, hence, loaded sin on all of humanity. In the words of the Bible, in sin did my mother conceive me, because by Adam's disobedience, the many were made sinners. In other words, just by being born, a person is already saddled with guilt. Christianity extends this guilt to everyone. There is no one righteous, not even one. All have together become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one. And all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. It is a fortunate coincidence, then, that Christianity provides the only absolution of this guilt. By following Jesus, a person will be liberated from that original sin. This is coupled with the idea that Jesus died for our sins. Thus, out of nothing, Christianity has made people indebted to their main prophet. Islam works in the same way. The Quran talks repeatedly of the gifts that God has given to mankind. God sends rain to give life, causes the cows to produce milk, makes dates so that we can eat, and taught the bee to make cells so that man may have honey. God also produces corn, olives, date palms, grapes, and every other fruit just for us. When people use or consume these things, they are made to feel as if they are obliged to thank God for them. Thus, by simply being alive, we are already indebted to God. If we do not bow to the power who gave all these gifts, we are considered ungrateful. Here's a side remark about that. A God-free scientific explanation for the existence of cows, dates, and olives can be found in the chapter on the universe of this book, relieving the reader of any need for gratefulness to a God. Our next topic is push for perfection. Guilt is a powerful force for control, and a religion that succeeds in producing feelings of guilt in its believers can steer them very effectively. A common way in which this happens is through the establishment of rules that are impossible to obey to perfection. It is thus likely that the believer will violate these rules sooner or later, or even continuously. This means that sincere believers find themselves in an enduring state of bad conscience, caught in the gap between how they think they should be and how they actually are. No matter what they do, it is never good enough. Thereby, the religion maintains a grip over the conscience of its adherents. But it is not just prohibited actions that induce guilt. Prohibited thoughts can as well. By considering thoughts as tantamount to actions, a phenomenon called thought-action fusion, religious individuals can conclude that prohibited thoughts, too, represent a type of moral failure. Once that state of guilt has been put in place, the religion proposes itself as a way to obtain absolution from that guilt. As American psychologist Albert Ellis argued, religions deliberately instill self-damnation in their adherents and then provide guilt-soothing rituals to allay these feelings. In this way, the adherent feels grateful to the religion for having removed the problem that it created in the first place. Iranian-Canadian author Armin Navabi argues similarly. People are told that they are inherently sinful, and that the only way to become good is by giving over control of their life to faith. In this view, religion creates much of the anxiety it cures. This happens in several religions. Let's start with Christianity. Jesus says, "Whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery." Since most people have looked at someone in lust, this automatically makes them sinners. Similar is the instruction in the Ten Commandments to not covet what belongs to your neighbor, something that would amount to a thought crime in the terminology of British author George Orwell. Catholicism, in particular, has been measurably successful in instilling high levels of guilt in its adherents, as shown by several psychological studies. When someone feels guilt, they can confess their actions to God or to a priest to be liberated from their guilt. Then they feel thankful to their God. In this way, the religion has created an emotional bond between the adherent and its God. Islam works in the same way. The Quran talks of numerous prohibitions, including taking unbelievers as friends, doubting the Quran, sexual pleasures outside marriage, not praying, eating pork, looking at the other sex, and not covering up. In conservative interpretations of the faith, these rules are complemented by an elaborate system of rules, the Sharia, that penetrates everyday life from marriage to prayer and daily hygiene, including how to use the restroom. These rules certainly had their purpose at the time of their institution. However, one lasting effect is that adherents have a litany of rules to follow, and thus more chances to slip up. This makes it more likely that a believer will feel guilt. Furthermore, the Quran states that God observes us continuously, thereby enforcing these feelings. And it is not just God who watches, but the community as well. Islam knows a culture of commanding right and forbidding wrong, in which adherents are tasked with ensuring the compliance of others, thus putting continuous pressure on everyone in the community. The release from guilt is achieved through repentance. Through this mechanism, the religion first instills guilt and then relieves it. As we saw in Christianity, this cycle creates an emotional bond between the believer and the religion. Spiritism calls upon adherents to abandon selfishness and to practice abnegation in order to combat the predominance of the corporeal nature. Since every human is by nature selfish and corporal by nature, this is a commandment that cannot be obeyed in perfection. Repentance and prayer then alleviate these failings. Judaism knows a catalog of 613 commandments derived from the Torah. While the Talmud is sure that their number must be 613, it does not list them. A popular listing, the Sefer HaMitzvot, prohibits astrology, cross-dressing, tattoos, wearing a mixture of wool and linen, shaving, settling in Egypt, straying after illicit pleasures, kindness towards idol worshippers, forgetting Amalek's deed, tearing out hair, non-kosher food, lending with interest, borrowing with interest, cursing a leader, working on Shabbat, provocative behavior, out-of-wedlock intimacy, and other behaviors. Given that the list is quite comprehensive and not universally agreed on, it is highly likely that an adherent will violate one or more of these commandments. Luckily, Judaism also provides the remedy for such transgressions. Yom Kippur is an annual day devoted to communal repentance for sins committed over the course of the previous year. Again, we find a cycle of condemnation and absolution that binds adherents to their faith. This effect is independent of the actual use of the rules for mankind. As some wise person said, sin is an imaginary disease invented to sell you an imaginary cure. Our next topic is heavy punishment. When a person does not obey societal rules, the most effective way to prevent that person from reoffending is to kill them. Another quite effective solution is to amputate limbs. A person without hands can no longer steal, injure, or kill. Such punishment also acts as a deterrent to others. In this book, we argue that brutal punishments can irreversibly injure an innocent person, go against the principle of empathy, and devalue human life. But religion does not have to care, as it claims sole governance over compassion, conscience, and morality. Now, if we compare two religions side by side, one that has cruel punishment and one that doesn't, it becomes clear that a religion with cruel punishment will have a more obedient following, and thus a competitive edge over another. For this reason, most major religions that have survived until today know cruel punishments, at least in their scripture. Let's start with Islam. The Quran specifies cutting off the hands of a thief, flogging adulterers, and crucifying those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger, beating consistently disobedient women, and death for those who kill a Muslim. One verse prescribes kinship punishment. If someone is murdered, then a kin member of the murderer, who is otherwise unrelated to the murder itself, is to be killed in retaliation. Today, Muslim opinion differs widely on whether brutal punishments should be allowed. Still, corporal punishments are approved of by the majority of the population in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Egypt, and Iraq, and by large pluralities in other Muslim-majority countries. Stoning as a judicial sentence exists in 9 Muslim countries, and 5 Muslim countries have amputation as punishment in their law books. Judaism is not much different, at least historically. The Torah prescribes the death penalty for prophets of other gods, prophets whose prophecies do not come to pass, seers, sorceresses, those who follow other gods, sons who consistently disobey their parents, and women who falsely claim to be a virgin before marriage. It also prescribes death for blasphemy, working on the Sabbath, sexual relations with a virgin engaged to someone else, rape of a betrothed virgin, adultery with married women. Both parties are to die. Marrying one's wife's mother, sexual relations between males, bestiality, murder, smiting a parent, and cursing a parent. The techniques to employ are stoning, hanging, burning, stabbing, and crushing. Penalties for lesser offenses include retaliation, the eye for eye principle, and lashing. Based on this, Judaism has traditionally known execution by stoning, burning, slaying, and strangulation. Today, the death penalty is less popular. Israel, the only Jewish country, has the death penalty in its laws, but executed the last person in 1962. Christianity inherited corporal punishment from Judaism. Jesus teaches clemency in these matters, but upholds the law and principle, saying, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law. Until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law." Paul likewise approves of the death penalty, saying, "If I'm guilty of doing anything deserving death, I do not refuse to die." In agreement with this, both secular and religious Christian rulers have been quite brutal over the course of history. Today, however, these practices have ceased. In Catholicism, torture was abolished in 1965. Anglicanism has opposed the death penalty since 1988. Orthodoxy since 1989, and Catholicism since 2015, not so Hinduism. The laws of Manu require corporal punishment if fines and admonitions fail. Beating is on order for punishing a wife, a son, a slave, a pupil, or a younger brother. For adultery, which includes touching a woman inappropriately, addressing her outside the village, or offering her gifts, the penalty is death, except for Brahmins. Brahmins cannot be put to death, nor can they suffer corporal punishment. Others can. For example, 2 fingers are to be cut off for contaminating a maiden. For injury, the punishment for the lowest caste is amputation. Generally, amputation may be of the tongue, the hands, the feet, the eyes, the nose, the ears, or the organ. For insulting someone of a higher caste, the tongue is cut out. Intercourse across castes is punished by castration or death for the member of the lower caste. Ways of executing criminals include devoration by dogs in a place frequented by many, and burning on a red-hot iron bed, or in a fire of dry grass. The laws of Manu are of disputed authenticity. However, this does not change the fact that corporal punishment was used in Hindu society much in the way that the laws of Manu stipulate. Punishments included whipping, branding, mutilation, and execution. Still today, India upholds the death penalty. The Chinese religions appear more clement, but only at first glance. Confucius explicitly shuns punishment, saying, if you control people by punishment, they will avoid crime, but have no personal sense of shame. If you govern them by means of virtue and control them with propriety, they will gain their own sense of shame, and thus correct themselves. He also explicitly shuns the death penalty, asking what is the need of killing. For Taoism, Lao Tzu similarly writes, to replace the executioner and kill is like chopping wood in place of the master carpenter. To chop wood in place of the master carpenter, rarely one does not hurt one's own hand. On the contrary, heaven arms with love those whom it would not see destroyed. However, the Book of Rights, one of the 5 classics, states that, in all determining on the application of any of the 5 punishments, it was required to decide according to the judgment of heaven. The 5 punishments were tattooing, cutting off the nose, cutting off a limb, castration, and execution. These punishments were indeed used in ancient China until 600 CE, when they were replaced by beatings and forced labor. The death penalty remains in place up to this day. Buddhism, in contrast, is opposed to the death penalty. The Buddha says, he, the layman, should not kill a living being, nor cause it to be killed, nor should he incite another to kill. Do not injure any being, either strong or weak, in the world. The current Dalai Lama also opposes the death penalty. Spiritism opposes physical punishments. As this religion postdates the Enlightenment, cruelty is considered the instinct of destruction in its worst form, and never necessary. It holds that education should be given preference over punishing wrongdoing when done. The death penalty is also condemned. As Isaac Asimov said, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. Our next topic is religious education. Canadian-American cosmologist Lawrence Krauss has made the following observation. Assume that a particular religion was not taught to children, and therefore that an entire generation grew up without knowledge of said religion. If that generation were to then look into the holy scriptures of the religion, they would probably find them baseless, bizarre, or even revolting. More than likely, they would not adopt the religion even in their later life, and crucially, they would also not teach it to their children. Thus, within a generation, the religion could be wiped out. Change, Krauss proposes, is always just a generation away. Following Krauss's logic, it makes sense that all major religions that have survived until today have placed a great importance on teaching the principles of the religion to children. As we have seen before, children can easily be made to believe almost anything. If the child later were to find out that a particular teaching was wrong, the child would likely stop believing in it. However, since religious claims are usually unfalsifiable, the child will never find out. Therefore, educating children religiously is one of the most effective methods of spreading the faith. This principle appears in all major religions. Children are usually educated in the religion of their parents. We have discussed contemporary practices in the chapter on the founding of religions. The Baha'i faith differs from the other world religions in that children under 15 years old do not automatically inherit the faith of their parents. At the age of 15, Baha'i children are free to reaffirm that they are Baha'i, or, without stigma, to leave the Baha'i faith. Neither their parents nor their community may compel them to be Baha'i. Yet, this free choice is to some degree utopic because schools must train the children in the principles of religion so that the promise and the threat recorded in the books of God may prevent them from the things forbidden. As Hypatia of Alexandria said, fables should be taught as fables, myths as myths, and miracles as poetic fantasies. To teach superstitions as truths is the most terrible thing. The child mind accepts and believes them, and only through great pain and perhaps tragedy can he be in after years relieved of them. Here's a side remark about that. If people are not introduced to a religion from an early age and discover its scripture only as adults, they risk taking its contents literally. They may then reject the scripture and the religion as inconsistent, or, worse, adhere to the religion, but reject the more humane reinterpretations of its scripture that have been developed in recent times, thus becoming a conservative or even an extremist adherent. Our next topic is target the weak. A religion aims to propagate itself. Here, the aims to is to be understood in the Darwinian sense, meaning that all those religions that did not propagate themselves have died out. One particularly effective way to propagate a religion is to preach it to people who are susceptible, such as people without formal education. These people are more likely to believe information passed along to them from perceived sources of authority, and less likely to be able to verify these sources themselves. People who live in poverty or suffering. These people may feel a greater need to appeal to the supernatural in their day-to-day lives. For those who see no way out of their suffering, religion can appear attractive because it can provide an explanation of their pain or a hope for a better future in the afterlife. People in despair, such as the homeless, the jobless, the lonely, the physically or emotionally abused, the grief-stricken. These people are emotionally vulnerable and will be more open to messages of hope for a better life. They might also be tempted by the idea that there is someone supernatural who cares about them. People with remorse, such as prison inmates, those who have made decisions they regret, or those who cannot live up to their own standards. These people find themselves tormented by their conscience and hence will be more receptive to promises of absolution that a religion can provide. People who are elderly or ill, or people who suffer because their relatives are elderly, ill, or have passed away. These people are more interested in theories about death and the afterlife, as well as those that give meaning to their lives. A religion can provide both. People who are insecure, such as those who feel unsure in their life choices. These people will appreciate the moral framework that religion provides and the rights that give structure to life. People who suffer from social isolation, be it because they are foreigners, newcomers to a place, or otherwise excluded from the mainstream society. These people are often looking for community and may be happy to find it in religion. People who are young, such as children. Young people are generally more accepting of authority, as we have discussed before. The above people will be more susceptible to a religion than people who are educated, healthy, well-integrated, and happy in their lives. It is true that targeting susceptible people does not have the same impact as targeting the powerful, such as kings, government officials, TV channel operators, or YouTube influencers. However, even if the vulnerable are not mighty, they cannot be ignored if their numbers are large. Hence, religions typically reach out to these people. This is not to say that adherents who help the vulnerable do so with bad intentions. It is merely to say that one of the side effects of this help, intended or not, is that the religion appears more attractive to a larger number of people. And indeed, to this date, religious people are typically those with the least resources. Minority groups, the poor, the uneducated, etc., at least in the United States. We can see this most prominently in Christianity. This religion often associates itself with helping the weak, the fallen, the elderly, the ill, and the poor, following biblical teachings. Therefore, many Christian denominations run hospitals, orphanages, schools, kindergartens, grief management sites, migrant help centers, emergency relief services, or counseling services. We may assume that people who voluntarily work in these institutions do so with good intentions. However, one unavoidable side effect of this work is that the beneficiaries come to view Christianity favorably. Christianity would certainly have less adherents if it did not constantly reach out to the weak and the poor. The principle is also at work in Islam. The Quran prescribes giving alms to the poor. Regular almsgiving is even one of the 5 pillars of Islam, known as zakat. However, the predominant view is that zakat is only ever to be given to Muslims, or to those who can be won for Islam. Thus, zakat serves also the goal of attracting new adherents as well as keeping adherents in the faith. Judaism has the same idea. This religion knows the concept of almsgiving as tzedakah. However, like Islam, it has historically largely been restricted to recipients within the faith. In Hinduism, charitable donation is known as dana. The laws of Manu tell us to give when we are asked. Other holy scriptures, such as the Bhagavad Gita, likewise encourage charity, stating, "Alms given to one who does nothing in return is accounted pure." We can hypothesize that this tradition helps maintain social stability and the religious status quo. In a country such as India, where 20% of people live below the poverty line, such a system most likely helps maintain social stability, and Hinduism with it. The principle is less prominent in Spiritism, Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. All of these religions know the concept of compassion towards the less fortunate. However, charity appears to be neither limited to adherents of the faith nor used to spread the faith. As some wise person said, catch people at their worst. Grief counseling sites, sexual assault survivor sites, bankruptcy sites. Target the nons. Isolate the target. Convince them that only your church cares about them. Our next topic is punish apostasy. The act of abandoning a religion is called apostasy. Apostates may become atheists or adherents of other religions. Naturally, a religion that takes a light stance towards apostasy risks losing adherents, and therefore being outnumbered by other religions. Therefore, all major religions have historically punished apostates. Today, the punishment of apostates is no longer implemented in countries that support freedom of religion. What remains, however, is a general negative attitude towards apostates. All major religions today condemn, shun, insult, threaten, or ridicule apostates. The principle appears first in historical Judaism. The Torah takes a hard position on apostates, stating, "The fool says in his heart, 'There is no God.' They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none that doeth good." It also instructs adherents to kill apostates, blasphemers, and prophets. Hence, historical interpretations of Judaism mandated the death penalty for apostasy. However, this tenet was later dropped, and in contemporary interpretations, there is no punishment for leaving the faith. Christianity inherited the death penalty for apostasy from Judaism. Jesus affirms the validity of previous laws and principle. In particular, he notes that if anyone causes one of those who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Paul also approves of the previous laws mandating the death penalty for apostasy. He encourages us to watch out that none of us has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. Based on such verses, the prevalent medieval interpretation of Christianity was that apostasy had to be punished by death. Accordingly, the Inquisition burned thousands of people at the stake. Apostasy remained a punishable offense in Catholic countries until the late 18th century. In 1826, Caetano Ripoll was the last person executed for doubting the Catholic teaching. In 1965, however, the Catholic Church determined that everybody has the right to religious freedom, quite possibly because by then Christians had themselves become the largest persecuted religious minority in the world. Still, as we have discussed, apostates or atheists are routinely discriminated against in Christian countries, especially in the United States, where atheists are excluded from holding public office in some states, are associated with criminality, are shunned by family and friends, and are discouraged as life partners. Islam also punishes apostasy, at least in its traditional interpretations. The Quran says, "Let there be no compulsion in religion." However, this verse was historically interpreted so as to apply only to dhimmis, that is, to non-Muslims under Muslim rule. For Muslims, Islam has historically punished apostasy by death, based on Quranic verses that ask adherents to kill unbelievers wherever they find them, to strike off their heads, and to fight until all religion is for the God of Islam. Beyond that, approximately 1/4 of the Quran consists of insults, wraths, and threats against unbelievers, who are the worst of all creatures. Today there are different opinions on the question of what to do with apostates, including the opinion that they are free to leave Islam. However, the view that apostates should be killed persists and is shared by the Al-Azhar University, the Egyptian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, all 4 schools of Sunni Islamic law, the majority of Muslims in Egypt, Palestine, and Jordan, and large pluralities in the other Muslim-majority countries. Indeed, 12 Muslim countries punish apostasy by death. Even in more liberal Muslim countries, and even in Western countries, apostates face social exclusion, harassment, and worse. Hinduism shows no clemency to apostates either, at least historically. The laws of Manu withdraw all rights from a person who does not pray as prescribed, downgrades them to the lowest caste, and banishes them from town. Furthermore, it declares forgetting the Vedas, the holy scriptures of Hinduism, equivalent to drinking hard liquor, which, in and of itself, is a mortal sin. Heretics may not be greeted, may not be given water, and are generally considered to be the mark of darkness. The Mahabharata tells us that the rejection of one's own creed, the practice of other people's creed, are acts that no one should do. In any case, Hinduism prohibits apostates from marrying believers, thus implicitly shunning and excluding apostates. To this day, atheists, who include many apostates, lack legal recognition in India, and a member of parliament can openly call for the execution of apostates. Not all religions punish apostates. Spiritism, for example, is remarkably tolerant. This religion was born after the Enlightenment, and hence it argues that man has no right to set up barriers against freedom of conscience. It is also considered a fail in charity to scandalize those whose belief is not the same as our own. As for relations with non-adherents, the Spirit's book says, "Let those who consider the facts in question as unworthy of their attention abstain from studying them. No one would attempt to interfere with their belief, but let them, on their part, respect the belief of those who are of a contrary opinion." As some wise person said, "The fool says in his heart, 'There is no God.' If even the fool gets it, what's your problem?" Our next topic is punish criticism. An ideology that permits criticism of its tenets runs the risk of having its vulnerabilities exposed. Hence, most major religions have punished any criticism of their tenets, typically as blasphemy, that is, the act of insulting God or sacred things. This principle appears in historical Judaism already. As with apostates, the Torah instructs that blasphemers should be punished by death, and indeed, blasphemy was punished as such in the historical interpretation of the religion. There is hardly any evidence that trials for blasphemy took place among Jews in post-biblical times, but it remains a punishable offense in Israel. Christianity inherited the prohibition of blasphemy from Judaism. Jesus further clarifies that blasphemy is a sin that cannot be forgiven. Paul tells us to warn the heretic twice and then to have nothing to do with them, because such people are warped and sinful. Based on such verses, blasphemy was punished severely during most of the religion's history. Blasphemy remains a punishable offense in numerous countries, including several predominantly Christian ones, such as Italy, Germany, Russia, Finland, Brazil, South Africa, Spain, and others. However, the Catholic Church has now started opposing such laws, perhaps because it realized that they are employed most often against Christians themselves, principally in Muslim countries. The other denominations of Christianity did not historically punish blasphemy as drastically as did Catholicism. Islam, however, did and still does. The Quran prohibits questioning what Allah or the Prophet Muhammad have decided. Offering insult to Allah, to the Prophet Muhammad, or to any part of the divine revelation is a crime in Islamic religious law, as well as in the vast majority of Muslim-majority countries. All four schools of Sunni Islamic law hold that such behavior incurs the death penalty. Even in non-Muslim countries, criticism of Islam can lead to death threats by extremist adherents of the faith. In this way, nobody, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, can take it lightly to criticize Islam in public, which shields the religion from critical investigation. The same goes for Buddhism. The Buddha teaches that those who say that the recluse Gautama Buddha does not have any superhuman states will wind up in hell. This statement seems to indicate only otherworldly punishments for apostates. But in Indonesia, Buddhist authorities have supported the punishment of blasphemy also in this world, and it remains an offense in mainly Buddhist Thailand and Burma. Hinduism, for its part, took a somewhat unusual trajectory concerning blasphemy. The religion used to be relatively tolerant concerning varying interpretations and even mockings of the faith. This changed in the 19th century when the British brought ideas of monotheism and orthodoxy to India during colonization. Upon demands by Indian Muslims, the British instated a law against outraging religious feelings in the colony, penalizing the deliberate insult of a religion, and aimed at the protection of the Muslim minority. After independence, Hindu nationalism rose, and with it the feeling that Hindu-ness deserved protection as well, in particular from insults to Hinduism. To this day, the British law against outraging religious feelings de facto functions as a criminalization of blasphemy. As Mahatma Gandhi said, every true scripture only gains by criticism. Our next topic is proselytism. Like hoax mail, a religion will be successful only if it propagates itself. One way to do this is to encourage people to spread the religion. This practice is called proselytism, and it is part of some religious belief systems. We all know that it is part of Christianity, and Jesus tells us to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and to go into all the world and preach the good news to all creation. From these verses, mainstream interpretations of Christianity derive what is called the Great Commission, that is, the duty to bring Christianity to other people. Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons are particularly known for their proselytism. Proselytism is also part of Islam. The Quran tells us to invite all to the way of thy Lord with wisdom and beautiful preaching, and argue with them in ways that are best and most gracious. Inspired by this verse, today's Islam knows dawah, that is, the duty to invite other people to Islam. For the Baha'i faith, too, proselytism is a part of the religion. Baha'is who venture into countries to spread the faith are called pioneers. Not all religions proselytize. Spiritism, for example, opposes proselytism. This religion emphasizes the freedom of conscience and is not interested in proselytizing. At the same time, the religion argues that one should endeavor to bring back into the path of truth those who are led astray by false principles. Judaism does not know proselytism either. This religion is closely bound to the Jewish ethnicity and does not aim to convert others to the faith. Hinduism and Buddhism also do not proselytize. Our next topic is keep adherents uneducated. The more educated a person is, the more likely they are to question everything, including their religion. Hence, if a religion encourages people to read and learn, it risks contributing to its own demise. Our theory thus proposes that religions that oppose education will be more successful. It is, of course, unpopular today to oppose education, and few religious leaders will state that they do. However, we can see that the original scriptures of some world religions do not encourage education, and that the historical or contemporary interpretations of these religions don't either. We see this principle at work in historical Catholicism. The Bible tells the story of the tree of knowledge. God punishes Adam and Eve, the mythological progenitors of mankind, for eating from a tree whose fruit gives knowledge. The metaphorical meaning of this story is clear. God punishes people for striving for knowledge. The Bible also encourages us to believe in God with the heart rather than the mind. These are isolated passages, but they were mirrored in the historical disdain for education in the Catholic Church. When the Church reigned Europe during the Middle Ages, the literacy rate, which we can take as an upper bound for formal education, remained below 20%. It rose only once the Church lost its power during the Enlightenment. In the same vein, the Catholic Church censored books until well into the 20th century. It even prohibited people from reading the Bible on their own without guidance from a priest. This changed only in 1992. Islam is also not known today for promoting literacy. The first word that the Prophet Muhammad reported to have heard from the angel Gabriel was Iqra, an instruction that is often translated as read. The word Quran itself, which occurs already within the scripture, is derived from the verb qara, to read. The Quran also underscores the importance of writing, particularly in the context of contracts. It is no coincidence, then, that education, higher learning, and science flourished throughout the Muslim world during the Islamic Golden Age, spanning the 8th to the 13th century. Islamic rulers established libraries and centers of learning, such as Baghdad's House of Wisdom and Cairo's Al-Azhar University, to foster advanced scholarship. This intellectual lead over medieval Europe, however, gradually eroded during the Ottoman period. From the 15th century onward, education became increasingly oriented toward religion. The knowledge, ilm, cultivated and transmitted through centuries of madrasa learning grew centered on humanity's relationship with God, and Christian schools came to surpass Muslim ones in quality. The printing press, invented in the 15th century and a powerful engine of knowledge dissemination in Europe, did not reach the Muslim world until the 18th century. The legacy of this educational decline remains visible today. Some 20% of people in Muslim-majority countries are illiterate, compared to 13 in other developing countries and just 2 in the developed world. In sub-Saharan Africa, 79% of Muslims have received no formal schooling, as opposed to 51% of Christians in the region. In India, Muslims record the highest illiteracy rate among all religious groups at 20%, a figure comparable only to that of communities historically referred to as untouchables. Not all religions depreciate education. Judaism, for example, has traditionally put a large emphasis on education. Sometime around 65 CE, the Jewish high priest Joshua ben Gamla issued a religious decree that every Jewish father should send his young sons to primary school to learn to read in order to study the Torah. Over the next few centuries, a formal school system attached to synagogues was established. During the Middle Ages, Jews were prohibited from owning land and were excluded from guilds in Europe, which pushed them into more intellectual professions such as trade and moneylending. To this date, education remains an important value for Jews, and Jews are the most highly educated of the world's major religious groups. Only the ultra-Orthodox Jews focus mainly on religious education, at the expense of secular education. Spiritism, too, supports education. This religion was born after the Enlightenment. Hence, it holds that it is only education that can reform mankind. Confucianism also emphasizes education. The first sentence of the Analects is, "Isn't it a pleasure to study and practice what you have learned?" This theme is repeated throughout the book. As Bertrand Russell said, "So far as I can remember, there is not one word in the Gospels in the praise of intelligence." Our next topic is rituals. Most religions have rituals, that is, ceremonies that are performed with the goal of pleasing or interacting with the supernatural. These rituals fulfill important social functions. They can create a feeling of community, manage anxieties, and give meaning to one's environment. A religion that offers such rituals is thus more attractive than a religion that does not. There is a second raison d'être for rituals. A religious community can give material advantages to its members. The problem is that these advantages come also to so-called free riders, that is, to people who just happen to live in the religious community without actually sharing its values and commitments. The rituals can serve to weed out these people. Only those who follow the rituals in every detail are considered seriously committed to the group. The more effort the rules require, the stronger the signal, a principle known as the costly signaling theory. The strongest signal of all is suffering. If you suffer physical harm for your religion, by fasting, self-mutilation, persecution, or martyrdom, then this is the clearest signal to others that you are a true believer. This is because physical suffering is a phenomenon that even the most metaphysical of thinkers must accept as truth, lest they be exposed to it. Suffering convinces not just others, but also the sufferer. As soon as you undergo elective harm for your religion, you have to believe in it. Otherwise, you would have to admit to yourself that you have been fooled. In this spirit, all religions have developed rituals that are physically unproductive but serve to display commitment to the community. Christianity, fasting, going to church, and wearing a cross. Judaism, wearing religious clothing, most notably the kippah, a skull cap worn by men, resting on Saturdays, observing dietary laws, and submitting one's boys to circumcision. Islam, observing dietary laws, such as abstaining from alcohol and pork and eating only halal food, wearing the veil for women, submitting one's boys to circumcision, practicing daily prayer, fasting during the month of Ramadan, and pilgrimaging to Mecca. Hinduism, worshiping, pilgrimaging, participating in festivals, and performing rites of passage. Buddhism, praying honoring the Buddha, and having Buddha figures at home. Taoism, burning joss papers and participating in festivals. Confucianism, worshiping ancestors and participating in festivals. Spiritism, participating in seances, rituals that serve to get into touch with the spirits. American anthropologist John Tooby hypothesizes that people prove their loyalty to the religious community not just by following costly rituals, but also by professing costly beliefs. These beliefs are costly in the sense that they are so incoherent that only a true believer would profess them, such as God is one and three at the same time. In the spirit of the costly signaling theory, Tooby hypothesizes that the more preposterous a belief is, the more effective it is as a signal of loyalty to the religion. Canadian-American cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker agrees and argues that there are zones of life beyond the immediate experience: the distant past, the unknowable future, and the metaphysical. People have no way of knowing what happens in these zones. Any beliefs about them are difficult or impossible to falsify, and in any case, any claim about these zones makes no discernible difference to a person's life. Therefore, these zones are areas wherein people can profess beliefs that serve not to communicate a fact, but to show adherence to a community or ideology. Whether these beliefs are literally true or false is the wrong question to ask. The function of these beliefs is to construct a social reality that binds the tribe or sect and gives it a moral purpose. As American author Roy Sobolewski summarized, such beliefs are things you are supposed to say, not things you reckon to be true. As Steven Pinker said, anyone can say that rocks fall down rather than up, but only a person who is truly committed to the brethren has a reason to say that God is three persons, but also a one person. Our next topic is alliances with political power. Some religions have developed the strategy of allying with the ruler or ruling class of their society. In this scheme, the religion justifies the authority of the ruler, and therefore, the ruler has an interest in making his subjects adhere to the religion. In this way, both religion and power mutually assure their own survival. Let's start with Christianity. Christianity was originally a minority religion in the Roman Empire, and Christians were even persecuted for their refusal to worship the Roman emperor. However, Jesus laid a basis for the coexistence of religion and state by proclaiming, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." After the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, legalized and popularized Christianity, it gradually became the majority religion in Europe. Since then, kings and emperors from Constantine himself to the medieval European kings such as Louis XIV of France, and even modern monarchs such as the King or Queen of England, have used this Bible verse and others to justify their rule. They thus had an interest in upholding the faith, which in turn benefited the religion. Islam took a different path to the same destination. Historically, Islam did not distinguish between religion and state. Muhammad was both a spiritual prophet and a political leader, and Islamic teachings provided the framework for organizing society. As a result, abandoning the faith was seen as an act of rebellion against the state, an offense punishable by death. Still today, many Muslims view the Western ideal of separating religion from politics as illogical. In line with this tradition, numerous modern Muslim nations maintain close ties between government and religion. Morocco, for example, designates its king as the commander of the faithful, reinforcing a mutually beneficial alliance between the monarchy and Islam. The Chinese religions also link faith and government. These religions know a mandate from heaven, which gives the emperor the divine right to rule. This divine right was installed in 1000 BCE and most likely ceased at the latest with the introduction of state atheism after the Chinese Revolution of 1949. Until then, the emperors had every interest in upholding the belief in that mandate from heaven. Hinduism, for its part, knows the concept of divine kings, that is, kings who have a divine power and authority. To keep this divine authority, the kings fostered relationships with the priests, Brahmins, who had, themselves, an interest in the survival of the religion. Today, India is a republic and thus has no king. The story is a bit different for the Baha'i faith. Like the Bible, the scripture of the Baha'i faith offers a path for coexistence of religion and secular authority. Its book of laws stresses obedience to the government. However, being a smaller religion, the Baha'i faith has not yet had the occasion to ally with a secular government. Our next topic is unfalsifiability. In the terminology of this book, a religion is a set of statements. Such a set of statements can be used to make predictions about the world. The problem is that these predictions may turn out to be false. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses predicted the end of the world in 1914. When this failed to come about, they updated their prediction to 1918, and later to 1925. Each time without success, Wikipedia maintains a list of unfulfilled predictions made by the official organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. Such false predictions risk making the religion unpopular. Therefore, the safest choice for a religion would be to make no predictions whatsoever. This, however, would make the religion uninteresting and meaningless. Another option is to make only very vague predictions. For example, Christianity has been predicting for 2,000 years that the end of the world is near. This prediction seems to be sufficiently vague to be plausible, while at the same time sufficiently interesting to be attractive. Technically, the statement is unfalsifiable. Such predictions have the advantage that nobody can find out whether they are wrong. Hence, most religions that have survived until today make only unfalsifiable predictions. This is also what makes them a religion in the first place, according to the definition we use in this book. This principle is at work in Christianity. This religion claims that the end of the world is near. Since it does not predict a fixed date, this prediction is unfalsifiable. The principle is also at work in Judaism, the Baha'i faith, and Islam. Each of these religions postulates the existence of a God who punishes the evildoers. If this punishment does not arrive now, then it will for sure arrive later, or at least in the afterlife. The claim of punishment is thus ultimately unfalsifiable. Hinduism and Buddhism take the same route. These religions postulate that bad deeds will have bad consequences. If these fail to materialize in this life, they will for sure come about in the next, which makes the claim unfalsifiable. Confucianism and Taoism may not know gods in the Abrahamic sense, but they also build on the unfalsifiable. These religions postulate the existence of a suprasystem called Tao or heaven. This suprasystem is understood to be powerful, ordered, awe-inspiring, and even undescribable. But no falsifiable prediction can be derived from it. Spiritism is based on purported physical manifestations of spirits. Thus, its statements are falsifiable. It suffices that one may ask the spirits a second time and get a different answer. However, Spiritism, too, falls back on the unfalsifiable for the definition of its world model. What appears like a void to you is occupied by matter in a state in which it escapes the action of your senses and of your instruments. As Carl Sagan said, "A fire-breathing dragon lives in my garage. Great, show me." "Oh, she's an invisible dragon." "Then show me the footprints." "Good idea, but this dragon floats in the air. Let's hear her breathe." She does not actually make any sounds that can be perceived by the human ear. "Then let's spray paint the dragon and make her visible." "She's an incorporeal dragon, and the paint won't stick." "Then what is the difference between an invisible, incorporeal, inaudible, floating dragon and no dragon at all?" Here's a side remark about that. Rest assured, if you don't see a dragon in your garage, then that means there's no dragon in your garage. Atheists hold that it is much the same with the gods. Our next topic is assume equivalence. Religions typically take care to educate people about their own religion. However, there are many religions, and adherents may be tempted to explore or even convert to the alternatives. Therefore, the religion must explain why it is the only true religion among the many. One strategy is to claim that the others are just variants of one's own religion. We see this in Christianity. There is a common opinion in the West that all religions essentially believe in the Christian God, just in different forms. The Catholic Church alludes to this belief by saying that from ancient times down to the present, there is found among various peoples a certain perception of that hidden power of God which hovers over the course of things. Islam, for its part, holds that all people are born with a natural faith in God, and that their initial true beliefs are then corrupted by their parents and society. Furthermore, it holds that the messages of all prophets before the Prophet Muhammad have been corrupted by the devil. The Baha'i faith holds that all religions basically serve the same purpose, and that the Baha'i faith unites them all. In a similar way, Spiritism argues that all religions teach you that the souls of the departed continue to see you, but they regard your afflictions from another point of view. Hinduism encompasses so many different beliefs, gods, and traditions that it is a prevalent opinion that other religions are just special cases of this system. The Buddha, for example, is sometimes considered an incarnation of Krishna. Allah, likewise, is sometimes identified with Brahman. The Bhagavad Gita, for one, explains that whoever worships another god just worships a form of the Hindu god Krishna. As some wise person said, "We're Hindus. Your theological and philosophical distinctiveness will be added to our own. Your God will be added to our pantheon. Resistance is futile." Here's a side remark about that. Even if these religions all claim that the other religions are mere variations, only the Baha'i faith and Spiritism draw the logical consequence and let their adherents marry adherents of the other religions. Our next topic is claim an illusion. Another way to explain why other religions exist is to claim that the other religions have been deliberately created by the powers of one's own religion. Thereby, the existence of the other religion becomes proof for the power of one's own spirits. In Judaism, this works as follows. If a prophet from another religion performs a miracle, then the Lord your God is testing you. Thus, a miracle by any non-Jewish prophet is nothing more than proof of the power of the Jewish God. In Christianity, Jesus predicts that false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders. In this way, Christians can believe that any prophet who appears and performs miracles is nothing more than proof of Jesus' prediction. Jehovah's Witnesses, a denomination of Christianity, even maintain that the non-Christian religions were created by the devil. Thus, the existence of the other religions mainly attests to the power of the devil. Islam works in the same way. Whenever another religion claims a miracle, Islam can say that these miracles were done by the jinns, the spirits of Islam. As for the resurrection of Jesus Christ, the Quran tells us that Jesus was not really resurrected. God only made it seem as if Jesus was resurrected. Thus, the apparent resurrection is really just a proof of the power of Allah. As Marshall Brain said, so there are 1 billion Muslims who think that all the Christians are delusional. And there are 2 billion Christians who think all the Muslims are delusional. Would you consider, at least for a moment, the possibility that all 3 billion of you are delusional? Our next topic is a meaning of life. Israeli history professor Yuval Noah Harari hypothesizes that a religion, or in fact any ideology, has to provide a kind of story that explains the world in order to attract adherents. This story must have 2 properties. First, it must be bigger than the life of an individual person. That is, it must encompass a nation, the world, or the universe. Second, it must provide a role for the individual believer. Each individual person must have an important contribution to that big story. As it so happens, the major religions all have a meme that satisfies these desiderata. The Abrahamic religions offer several stories that give people a reason to live, and all of them reserve an important role for the individual. One story goes that God created humans to praise him, and so every single human is called to serve God. Another story goes that life is a big test for the afterlife. God cares about each individual and wants to see whether each particular person deserves to go to heaven. Yet another story goes that God has a big plan for humanity, in which we all must play our part. The Indian religions hold that we exist to go through a cycle of rebirths until we are finally pure enough to reach nirvana. Again, the story is of cosmic dimensions, and yet there's a chance to reach nirvana for every single one of us. Taoism holds that humans should live in balance with the Tao, the universe, and that the spirit of the body joins the universe after death. In this way, every single person is connected to the universe as a whole. Confucius, in contrast, was concerned mainly with worldly behavior and goals. He is believed to have said, "To put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must first cultivate ourselves. And to cultivate ourselves, we must first extend our knowledge." From an atheist perspective, the idea that we have any sort of cosmically vital role is absurd, given the size and scope of the universe and the unimportance of our planet in it. In the words of Scottish philosopher David Hume, the life of a man is of no greater importance to the universe than that of an oyster. As Yuval Noah Harari said, most people who go on identity quests are like children going treasure hunting. They find only what their parents have hidden for them in advance. Our next topic is God's glory. A religion has to explain why bad things happen to good people. One particularly successful strategy is to say that good things come from the main deity and bad things happen because the deity is pursuing a deeper purpose that cannot be understood by humans. This way, the glory of the deity can only increase. If something good happens, it shows the power and benevolence of the deity. If something bad happens, it shows that the deity is so smart that it can do things whose positive effect we cannot see. Thus, it works like a double-acting reciprocating pump. Both bad things and good things, forward and backward movements, increase belief in the deity. Such a theory is, of course, unfalsifiable because it just reconciles a posteriori whatever happened with the supposed intention of the deity. It can never be used to predict what will happen. We see this in Christianity. In popular interpretations of this religion, good events in life are ascribed to God or Jesus. A bad event can be explained in various ways, as a mysterious act of God that we do not understand, as an act of God done so that something good can happen ultimately, and as a harbinger of the disasters predicted to happen when the end is near. In this way, believers will view any deterioration of the situation as confirmation of the prophecy and any improvement as a gift from God. Islam takes the same path. The Quran tells us that whatever good befalls you is from Allah, and whatever evil befalls you is from yourself. This way, God takes the glory for all positive things while rejecting the responsibility for the negative. Problems in life also have their purpose. They are a test of one's belief. Thus, everything that happens, good or bad, can be seen as proof of God. Buddhism and Hinduism know no God in the Abrahamic sense, but are also happy to use any life event to reinforce their own worldview. These religions believe in karma, that is, the idea that good deeds will entail good things and bad deeds will entail bad things, either in this life or in the next. This is assured by a super system that issues these rewards and punishments. Thus, whatever happens can be interpreted as proof of the existence of the super system. If something good happens, this shows that the super system rewards good people. If something bad happens, this shows that you must have done something bad in the past and that this is your punishment. Spiritism uses a similar strategy. In this religion, earthly life is a trial. If a righteous man undergoes misfortune, it is a trial from which, being bravely born, he will reap a rich reward, most likely in the afterlife or in a different incarnation. Thus, either God bestows happiness upon us, in which case he is evidently a good God, or he bestows sorrows upon us, in which case we will later reap a rich reward, and God is still a good God. Hence, no matter what happens, God is always good. As some wise person said, any God deserving worship would not want it. Any God wanting worship would not deserve it.